a typical spreadsheet editor, and I'm going to ask a very simple question. If this is our data source, what can we actually do with this? We have one column and two rows. This is the whole principle behind drawing, is that we have very little data. However, we can densify, i.e. create more points, and then we can actually draw. So if you can just create the data set, you could do this in Excel, you could type this out in Notepad, but once you have, let's copy this and paste it directly to Tableau. So again, this is going to show you very basic and simple techniques available. The key is that now that we have this, we are going to start on a process, several steps, to add more data points. In essence, to densify our data, and we'll do this by initially creating a bin object. And we're going to, from very first principles, right from your path, go to bin, and I'm going to size as 10. The video will be recorded, so if I'm moving a little quickly, that is fine. You can rewatch the video afterwards. Now, with this object, as you can see, it's typically used for histograms, but if I drag this onto rows, you can see that we now have our individual buckets, our bins, which goes from 0 to 360. And you can see that our rows have been entered here. So that's actually pretty neat that we have created, in essence, this frame. However, we don't have values everywhere because obviously there is no value that will fit in to the following. This is where using bins and table calculations really have value. And this is where it becomes very, very interesting. If I click out and create, if we create a field called index, let's see what that does. Let's double click to add this. Now this is quite interesting. With our bin and with index, we actually now have values. These are values that we can actually use. We can use index in calculations, which is quite interesting. However, can we get our data, our path value, can we get that into our data set as well? And the answer is yes. Let's create a value. Again, let's create a table calculation. Min value. Right, Windows min of path. So because we're calculating a Windows min, if we double click this, we now have the min value everywhere. Again, right now we're just showing you basic principles of data classification. Let me create another table calculation called TC max value, or max path would be more accurate. Window max path. Now, why is this important? Close my brackets. Let's click OK. Let's rename this to max min path. So now, as you can see, we have two data points from our original data set. However, we've now created 37 rows. We've now created a lot more rows. We've now made our values accessible to each row. And this is where it becomes interesting. We have, in essence, created more data. We've densified our data sets. Just two values. This is our data set. We now have all of this table. but what can we actually do with it? And this is where we will start applying drawing. So imagine this. I bring my index onto columns and on this circle. This is not special, this is not unique, we have 1 point. However, if I bring my path in and missing values, you can see I now have a lot more points. I'm going to take this and drop it into detail because I don't want to show the path in, but I want it to be included in the
Sorry, Toan.
Yes. Yeah.
Could you do full screen?
Is this not full screen?
Because the font is the screen is quite small.
This is literally my whole screen.
Okay.
Let me share application instead, it might help.
Share application? Okay.
Does that look better?
Yeah, it's much more better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay. So just to show that again, we brought in index, path. Now if I right click on index, go to compute using, let's include path bin into the conversation. And now we have the following. We have a lot of points, which is cool for now. But if I change to line, we now have a line. Okay, what else can we do with this? Let me just click on color and add a marker so you can see the individual points. What I also want to do is just have some fun and demonstrate how we can actually draw some curves and some interesting shapes. Let's go to create. I'm going to this sine curve. I'm going to type sine, gradient, and index. Let me click apply. I'm going to bring this into rows now. So you can see it's trying to curve, but right now we don't have that many points. So let's right click on path bin, edit, and instead of having 10, let's type and edit the size of the bin to 1. Now we've created our curve. Now, if you think about what we've actually done, we've taken of data, we've been able to actually plot out a sine curve with 360 points. All from 2 rows of data, we've been able to draw a curve. Let's expand on this a little bit. Let's create a new calculated field, and let's call this cos curve. Inside, I want us to type cos, radians, and index. So again, all we're doing is using the cos function. We're using our index, which is just a position, and we're using radians. I want to drag this into the following columns. And now I just want to drag this from path into path bin. So this is where it becomes really interesting, is that now we've created the following. We had a line, we've bent the line, we used a little bit more mathematics, and now we've actually drawn a circle. Remember, all this with 2 rows of data. Let's do one more thing. Let's click on control. Let's copy this one more time. So cos curve, Let's take path bin, drop it in. Let's turn this into a polygon. Now we have a fully filled circle. But this, in essence, is how we draw. Each of these rows or each of these points has a positional value which we can use. It has an index value which we can use in our drawing. All we can do now, we can use calculations like if our index is equal to 1, then position in one place, else position in another. One thing that I want us to consider is now that we have our shape, how do we get our underlying values in here? So if I want to show path, for example, in the tooltips, if you see the path value is null, because remember, path itself does not fit into any buckets. Well, it will fit into the last bucket, into the last bin, because 360, or potentially the first. Path now says 0. It now says null. If you look at the second item, all the way through until it reaches the last one. So therefore, that doesn't really quite work. However, if we take our TC map path and drop it in, we'll click compute using bin. So we're saying that calculate the TC max path using bin. Now you'll see the max path is available everywhere. This is just some very basic principles of how we can get data from very little, and we can actually create a frame. We can build our curves, we can build our shapes. So this is the basics of data identification, how we can take size, draw shapes. What we are going to do now is we are going to try to apply this to an actual data source. We are going to try to build a data visualization, a very simple one, but we are going to use all the required techniques. And once you've done this, you can do any other drawing you want. Well, I'm going to call this curves and let's call this lines and polygons. So we have our table, as you can see, we built it out really nicely. We've now built lines and polygons. Now we are going to create a very simple waffle. If you've never done this before, you will love it. So we are going to use the same techniques to create a waffle chart. We are going to build the frame. Then we are going to connect our data. And by the end, it's going to look beautiful. But let's give this a try. But the first thing I want to do is click on Add Connect New Data. I'm going to bring in the EU Superstore because I don't just want to build this using 2 rows of data. Incorporate this into our sample Superstore. Hopefully, you've all seen this data source before. This is out of the box. It comes with Tableau. Well, the first thing I want to do is to create a parameter. This is going to give us, I'm going to call columns. It will be an integer and I want 10 columns initially. You'll see how this works in a moment. The columns is just for controlling purposes. Let's click OK. What I'm going to do then is I want to create my path object. What we did in Excel, I want to apply this to our data. So I'm going to pick one of the fields that we don't use often. So ship mode, we're not doing too much with it. If we describe it, you can see that there's a few rules in there. That's fine. Let's create our path object. What I want us to do is create a new calculated field. I'm going to call this path. ship mode's first class, then I want us to put 1 else 100. So I'm creating an artificial way of generating rows for 1 and 100, the same as I did before with 0 and 360. Once we create it, click apply and OK. Let's right click on path, go to create bins, and let's select 1 for now. To test, let's bring this onto our data source. As you can see, as with the previous table, we've created this data densification frame. What I want to do now is create our index function so we can actually leverage this. This time I want to say -1 because I want us to start at 0 for now. Let's add this. Remember, this is the index function. It's just index table calculation -1. Now we've created all of our data densification points. We've created 100 of them. The key is now we can actually use this and start building out our waffle. So what we are going to do is create 2 calculated fields. One is going to be called rows, and the other one is going to be called columns. So let's try to build this out step by step. Let's bring this out for now. What I want us to do is create a calculated called rows. And for this, I just want index divided by number of columns. And then I just convert it to an integer just to kind of do a rounding, so to speak. I want us to bring this into rows. You see, not much special. Let's convert this to circles. So we see a big circle there. Now for rows, let's right click using and path. So you can see we've now created these points. If we actually hover over the point, you can see that there are actually 10 items. So now we need to create columns. So that's going to be another calculated field. And columns is going to be index. If you've never used modulo, it's an amazing calculation. I would highly recommend it. Let me say modulus, if they spell it. And now I want us to drag into columns. I want us to right click and convert using path. So you can see now this is the basis of our waffle chart. Let me now take region from location and let's drop this into columns. So you can see what we've done now is that we've actually drawn out our grid. When we turn this to squares, we've actually drawn a grid based on our data. This is the start of our waffle chart. And we've built this using data densification. We've drawn this by plotting individual dots. The question now that we have is how can we connect our data and use our data to these dots so that it makes a lot of sense. And we'll do that as we did previously. We can't actually get our sales values here because they're hidden, because they won't be available. What we want to do is create a calculated field for TC sales, Windows, sum of sales. That way, because it's a window calculation, that value will be visible in all of our data densified points. Nice and simple. So now we can see this, but we're not quite there yet. Because there are 100 points, we are going to calculate a percentage value. So what I want us to do, we've got the TC cells. I want us to create TC total cells. And the interesting thing is that it will have the exact same formula as TC cells. However, because we're using Windows table calculations, once we bring them into our view, we can configure them, adjust the configuration, what dimensions these values are going to be calculated on, and it will produce a difference. Lastly, I want to create one more calculated field called TC percentage, which will be TC cells divided by TC total cells. So this just creates a nice percentage. So for each region, what are the cells versus total? Let's click apply and OK. So as you can see, we're building out our various calculations. We are going to try to attach this to our data visualization. Let's start very simply by taking TC percentage, dropping it at the top. Let's convert this to a discrete. Let's right click, compute using path bin. So we have this percentage value. Again, what I did is drag it on, convert to discrete, and compute using path bin. What I want to do, you can see right now, obviously TC cells and total cells are the same configuration, so therefore it's bringing back the value of 1. Not quite the effect that we want, so let's right click on TC percentage. Let's go to edit table calculations and let's modify the calculation for total cells. So under nested calculations, you can see TC percentage is made of 2 table calculations. I want us to tap on region. When we do this, you can see that now the percentage looks a bit more interesting. What I want us to do is right click on percentage, go to default properties, number format, and let's change this to percentage. Let's format this so that we can definitely see it. You can see that now for each region, let's hide the following, we don't need to see this. You can see for each region, we actually have a percentage value. So we have our data in our view now. We have our grid. The last step that we need to do is try to apply our data to our actual grid. And we're going to do this now. This is what we refer to as, what I refer to as building or drawing data visualization using points. This is the first of 2 examples that we will cover today. So what I want us to do is create a new final calculation. I want us to call this TC color. Now, this is going to be the trickiest calculation that we create, but this final calculation will put in the percentage value with our actual grid, give us some color, and hopefully make you all very, very happy. So this calculation is nice and simple. We're going to say if index. So that's the individual points here. So that goes from 0 all the way to 99 is less than Windows max index. Then I am just going to put color else gray. Oops, so if that's less than TC percentage, then color else gray. So what you're essentially doing is you're looking at each position and you're calculating a value. You're comparing it against a percentage value. And that creates a nice and simple effect. I now want us to take this and drop it onto color. You can see we're starting to color our items. What I want us to do now is right click on color, go to compute using half bin. Again, we only have 1 point at the moment, which is fine. Right click, edit. And the same as with TC percentage, we're going to convert total sales as a nested calculation. We're going to tick path and region, and there we have it. We now have our boxes colored. So we've used our drawing technique to draw individual points. We've now connected them. However, one thing that still doesn't work for me is that I want the colors to be different. So I'm going to wrap it around with a table calculation. Change this around slightly. And I'm going to put region there. So instead of just having a plain color, we have region. Let's double click on this gray color and turn it to actual gray. One last thing, let's flip the axis, double click on rows. Let's flip the axis. Now let's hide the following. Let's do a little bit of formatting just to make my life better and everything feel good. So just hiding some grid lines, removing some row dividers. And now increase size. Now as you see, very simply, what we've done is, first principles, we've created data densification technique to add more points to our data. We've used table calculations index to actually draw individual points. And then we've actually merged our data into that grid and created this interesting effect. One last thing, we forgot columns. So because we have columns, let me just, for fun, I'm going to switch in animations. If I want to change this to 5, let me make this fit all. I can. With drawing, because this is all dynamic, we can very easily change our value. And now we can actually draw whatever effect that we actually wanted. From here, because of the dynamic nature, we can also turn this into circles, shapes, whatever we actually fancy. So this is from first principles, how you go about getting your data sets, adding path, and then building out and drawing the following. So this is how you can create a waffle chart. We still have another 20 minutes, so I'm going to take us into one more example, hopefully to really bring it home. So you can see we have a waffle chart. What I want to do is do something slightly different and leverage polygon. So I'm going to actually let's have a bit more fun with this. Let me create, as you can see, I just do this on the fly. And because I do it so often, it's actually quite simple for me. So let's create a variation of a bar chart using the exact same techniques, using the exact same data. However, this I want a slightly different path. So we're going to use the same Superstore data source. We are going to create slightly different variation of this. So in terms of ship mode, that's right. I'm going to call this path. Let me call it triangle. So we're going to create something slightly different using the same formula. However, first pass, then 1, else 3. So actually we're just creating another path object on our same data source, but this time we just want 3 points. We don't want 100 anymore. Let's click apply. Let's click OK. Let's right click. Let's create our bins. And let's give this as the value of 1. Using the same technique, let's explore the data. Let's bring it into table. You'll see you have 3 points. If you double click on index, you can see that we have the following. That looks nice and simple right now. So let's move path triangle onto detail. And I want to create new rows and new columns. For my columns, I want us to just use index for now. Let's put columns in there. Let's right click, compute using path triangle and line. We don't want to show the index value. So that looks pretty simple. We're just drawing our line again. We have 3 points. Let's create our rows now. Rows, triangle. What I want to do now is if index is equal to 1, then 1, 0. What does that do? Let's click apply. Let's bring that onto rows. Right click. Let's go to compute using. Let's compute this using the path that's in our details. That's interesting. We have a triangle. Most exciting thing. But what I want us to do now is let's bring region into color. What does that do? It means that now we have multiple regions. Instead of having 1, why not bring in the sales volume? What does that do? It goes blank, which is perfectly fine. Let's right click on triangle, go to compute using, and let's continually bring in the value. So now we have the following. We have obviously some triangles, which are now based on each individual region. This is kind of getting there. We build visualization. However, I want to push these along by 1 if possible. I want the columns to be adjusted. So let's an index. Let's call this region index, and I'm just going to use the function index. This is nice and simple. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4 as we used index before. Now with the columns triangle, all I want to do is add to it index. Let's click apply. Nothing happens because region index has not been configured yet. I click on columns, triangle, edit table calculations, and I now want this to become to click on that as well. Oops, right, index going to be that. Region index. Well, that's interesting. Oh, that looks very, very strange. And I love it when I get errors that I haven't seen before. Oh, wow. Alright then. Sorry about that. Let's continue with this for a moment and figure out why that works. Fair enough. Sorry about that. Just some slightly strange behavior. It happens sometimes. Well, now that we have this, we've moved it along. Actually, let me see if I could edit this and remove the following. No, it's not going to allow me to do that, which is fine. Let's just do that. Leave it as it is. Let's convert this to polygon type. And now you can see that we have our triangles. What I want us to do is to take this down so we can have some transparency. I now want us to sort by region. And here we have it. Let me just see if I could edit the region to add a bit more space to it. See how this works for us. It's gonna work. There's something slightly strange happening at the moment. Imagine you've built your interesting shape. And again, I need to actually investigate why those behaving slightly strange. But now if I take TC cell and drop that onto full right, compute using, make sure that path triangle is used. If you hover, you can now see the different values. Again, this is just an example of drawing in Tableau. Let me hide the following. Let me take all the data into filters. Let's filter by year. So now we have our chart. And again, this is something that is quite simple to create, but it shows you the ability to leverage polygons by drawing our individual shapes in Tableau. Again, we have our waffle chart where we drew individual points. We had a percentage. We now have our data visualization here, where we've just decided just to draw something very simple. And using tooltips, we can have our visualization. So there we have, just to quickly recap before we take questions. Using data densification technique, we can create multiple points based on few data. So based on 2 rows of data, we are able to draw lines, shapes, bend lines around, and fill them to create polygons. We're able to position them using table calculations and in color to merge our frame, our data densification frame, with our individual data source. And we can also explore polygons. So with that said, I hope you found this interesting. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Well, I feel it's very interesting, and thank you very much to bring the aha moment of Tableau. Yeah, 所以我想请问一下，那个大家有没有谁可以就是已经做完了，然后这样的话呢，可以给大家看一下的吗？那在这个时候的话呢，我想就是让大家投一下票，谢谢，就1分钟的时间。要如果说是大家有要如果说是做完的，然后想给图文看一下的话呢，然后我们可以来这边展示一下。 Sorry, Tom, just give me a second. I'm asking if there's any audience want to show what they have done for the visualization. Toan, are you going to share with us all the workbooks you have just shown?
Yep, I can save this and share this.
Yes, please. Please just share with me because some of the audience said, oh, it's probably a bit difficult or it's a bit fast. So that's why they are not able to follow through. 那么，所以这样的话呢，我会就是说，图案会把这个workbook 的话，会跟大家来分享一下。那么我们现在的话，可以就是把那个就是问题哈，可以把它就是说写在这个Q&A 里面。如果说是现在大家可以写一下。那么 Toan, I have a question actually. I have two questions from one of the participants. So, what's the calculation of the column for the waffle chart?
Yeah. So it's just index and using the percentage sign modulus on columns. So as index goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way down, modulus just basically keeps the number within the 10 column range. So number 11 will basically start at 1 again. So if you're not used the percentage sign in calculations, give it a try.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah. So another question just is the follow-up question for the for the dashboard. So why when create the calculation of the path triangle equals to if ship mode and equals to first class then 1? Is that means when only focus on the first class data and ignore the other type?
No, what we're doing here is we're just creating a calculation because then path bin will be created over the entire data source. We just want to make sure that we have 1 and 3 within our data. Because once we have 2, we can build our bin object between those 2 values. Because once we have that, we have a triangle bin, and we can build out the following. So we wanted 1 and 3 so that we have the following data in our data source. Because then we can show missing values and we can build this. If we wanted, we could have 1 and it would have been perfectly fine as well. As long as we get that data in our data set, we can manipulate and play with it.
Okay, great. Perfect. So I have another question is if you can show the triangle calculation, a row triangle calculation again.
Yeah. I'm a bit unsure why the error popped up, which is quite strange, so I need to investigate that, but this is essentially the calculation. The first point is 0. If the point is equal to 1, then make it the peak, otherwise have it as 0.
Okay. 所以我希望那个Mike Chen 对吗？希望回答你的问题了哈。因为我现在好像在Toan, are you able to see the questions from the Q&A? Because for me, from my side, it's all blank.
I don't have questions in Q&A.
You don't have Q&A. I think everything is coming through the chat box.
Yeah, in the chat, I don't see anything either.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm the only one to have the rights to see. Let me just check if there's any other question coming up. 我想请问一下大家还有其他的问题吗？可以打中文的，然后这样的话呢，我可以帮你们翻译。Okay, here's a question. I'm just trying to translate into English. Okay, there are two questions coming up. So, the size of the font, how do you choose the size of the font in the triangle?
The size of the font, it's basically whatever you fancy. So it's really up to you. So if I can get my tooltips to increase the font size, it really depends on your cosmetic eye and how you want to design.
Okay, so the next question is this skill or function can be used in the distribution? So for example, the normal distribution.
Yes, actually, is that I actually use the same technique. So drawing lines, it's not quite data classification, but I do have some tutorials on actually creating a normal distribution curve. So if you check out my website, there's a full end-to-end tutorial on doing that. It's mainly table calculations though, it's not quite drawing, but if you check out my tutorial, you'll see what I mean.
Okay, thanks. 就是我现在好像大家，如果说有问题的话，直接发那个叫什么吧，就是直接发到那个 chat box 里面吧，因为我现在看不到你们的问的问题，就是发到 Q&A 里面的我看不到。Sorry. So Toan, about the size of the size just now I've mentioned is actually the path, the 1 to n, the end value of the path to create data.
Yeah. So the path, basically, if you think about the value, so if you take a waffle chart, we have 1 minimum value and the maximum value is 100. Therefore, if our size is 1, then we're going to get 100 points. If our size is 10, for example, we'll get a lot fewer points. So that's the main thing to consider, is that how many points do you actually want in your data set. For example, with our triangle chart, we only wanted 3 points. Therefore, our path was 1 and 3, and then our size of bins is 1. So essentially, the size of bins and the min and max value is used to define how many points we want to draw with. I hope that makes sense.
希望回答了您的问题了。请问大家还有其他的问题吗？机不可失，失不再来。The Master 在这边，可以学的话呢，就尽量的多问一些问题吧，因为他突然来我们的这个故事会的机会还是不多的。Tuan, seems we don't have any questions so far. Oh yeah, so one more question. Sorry. So, can you show the waffle column and row formula again?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Column is the following. And the rows is here.
可以看得到。Yeah. Thank you for showing this. So another one is why use index plus region index in the column triangle calculation?
It's because we want to, so index creates the triangle, and so if you look at the following, what we're doing is just trying to move this along. So we're adding an index to each of the regions. So each of the regions would have 1, 2, 3, 4. That way we're moving them along as opposed to having them standing on top of each other. We want to shift them in the columns direction.
Thank you. 这个问题的话应该回答了吗？Oh, thank you, Tuan. 请问还有其他的问题吗？Okay, Tuan, actually, I have a question. When are you coming back to us again? Then probably maybe you can show some crazy dashboard you have drawn with Tableau.
Yeah, guess it's sometime in the year we could have some fun. There's no problem.
Okay, yeah, we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah, we can arrange that. We could have a lot more fun.
Sure，那要如果是这样的话呢，大家好像应该是没有问题了哈。我看到没有看到就是有任何的问题再问出来了。那这样的话，那今天就这样吧。然后我们也thank you Tuan，thank you very much. I'm not so sure if you are celebrating Thanksgiving.
No, I'm from the UK, so Thanksgiving is not for me.
Okay, okay. Then we'll just wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we look forward to seeing you again and again, many times in 2021. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for your support.
You're welcome, and thank you everyone for attending and listening to me, and hopefully you found this interesting.
Thank you.
All right, brilliant.
谢谢大家，谢谢大家。Thank you, Tuan. 哦，就是我想跟大家讲一下，那个所有的工作簿的话呢，还有这个录屏，我们都会分享给大家，都会分享给大家的。好，谢谢，谢谢，Bye, Tuan. Bye，再见啊，大家拜拜，谢谢，谢谢。